Have you ever stopped to think about how the things we use every day, like cell phones, chips, and even digital currencies, might be connected to something much bigger, something the Bible warned us about thousands of years ago? Just imagine. The Apocalypse, the final book of the Bible, talks about a system that will control the entire world, where no one will be able to buy or sell without a mark. Back then it seemed impossible, but now, with technology advancing so fast, this might be happening right in front of us, and many people don't even notice. I know this might sound surreal, but that's exactly why I'm here, to show you what's going on. We're seeing a scenario unfold that aligns perfectly with ancient prophecies. And believe me, I'm not talking about science fiction or conspiracy theories. It's all written in the scriptures. Let me tell you a story. Imagine a person, 2,000 years ago, having a vision of the future. They see a world where an image comes to life, speaks, and controls everything around it. At the time, no one could understand that. But now, with artificial intelligence, holograms, and even implantable chips, this doesn't seem so impossible anymore, does it? And that's not all. Political leaders around the world are increasingly concentrating power and control, just as the prophecies say will happen in the last days. Many of them might be influenced by forces they can't even imagine, dark spiritual forces, working to create a global system controlled by evil. If you think all of this is far from happening, think again. The signs are there, and they're happening faster than we imagine. Time is short, and we need to stay alert. What we're going to explore today will make you question, are we already living in the last days? So, stick with me, because what I'm going to show you could change the way you see the world around you. And trust me, the truth can't wait. Before we dive in, how about checking if you're already subscribed to the channel? That way, you won't miss the upcoming videos in this series, which will open your mind and put you ahead of everyone else with knowledge that few have. Throughout this video, I'll be revealing truths hidden in plain sight, helping you understand what's really going on around us. Technology and biblical prophecies. Are we living at the beginning of the end? Have you ever thought about how the technology we use every day could be linked to the ancient prophecies of the Bible? Things that seemed impossible just a few years ago, like artificial intelligence, holograms, chips, and even digital currencies, are changing the world at such a fast pace that it's making us uneasy. But what if I told you that, according to the Bible, all of this was already predicted? Yes, that's right. The scriptures, written thousands of years ago, warned us about the rise of global control that would rule humanity in the last days. And the most impressive part? We might already be heading towards that without even realizing it. In the book of Revelation chapter 13, we find one of the most fascinating and at the same time terrifying prophecies in the Bible. The prophecy about the image of the beast. The Apostle John, who had this vision while exiled on the island of Patmos, describes a powerful figure, an image that would have the ability to speak and force people to worship it. He tells us that those who refuse to do so will face terrible consequences. Now, imagine that. How could someone, 2,000 years ago, predict something like this? Back then, the idea of a talking image seemed like complete fantasy, like science fiction. But today, with artificial intelligence creating machines that think and speak, with holograms becoming more real every day, could it be that this image of the beast is starting to become a reality? Sounds surreal, doesn't it? But let's dive deeper. The image of the beast and today's technology. Let's think a bit about current technology. If a few years ago someone told you it would be possible to talk to a machine or see a person who's miles away, would you have believed it? Probably not. But look at where we are today. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more present in our lives. It's in our smartphones, in our computers, and even in our homes, controlling appliances, virtual assistants, and much more. And it doesn't stop there. We're entering an era where holograms are no longer fiction, and the ability to create living images that interact with people is already within reach. Now imagine an image of the beast that could communicate with people and even command actions. Doesn't seem so impossible, does it? Revelation 13:15 tells us, "The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed." And when we read that in light of today's technology, it's hard to ignore the similarities. What once seemed like an impossible prophecy is now starting to align with the technological advancements we see daily. Want a scarier example? Think about the advancements in identification chips. There are already ongoing projects to implant chips in people, allowing them to perform simple tasks like making purchases or accessing personal information. What used to be experimental technology is now being tested in some countries. And what if this kind of technology became mandatory? What if, without this chip, you couldn't buy food, pay your bills, or live your life normally? Revelation 13:17 warns us, and that no one could buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Now, take a deep breath and think for a moment. Are we closer than we think to seeing this prophecy come true? Digital currencies and global control. Another piece of this puzzle is the rise of digital currencies. You've probably heard of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, right? But what most people don't know is that governments in various countries are developing their own digital currencies. What does that mean? It means that, in the near future, physical money could disappear and be replaced by a currency that only exists in the digital world. With that, transactions could be monitored, controlled, and even restricted. Sounds far off? Don't be fooled. That future might be closer than you think. The Bible warns us that in the end times, there will be a system of global economic control. And who will control this system? The beast. Control over money will be one of the greatest tools of domination over humanity. Have you ever stopped to think about the power held by those who control the economy? Imagine living in a world where you can only buy or sell if you comply with the system's rules. And if you go against it, you'll be cut off. That's exactly what the Bible describes in Revelation. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. Revelation 13:16-17. And this is where digital currencies come in. With the digitization of money, controlling what you buy and sell will be easier than ever. Could central bank digital currencies be the first step towards this global control system? What should we do? Now that we're connecting the dots, the question is, what does all this mean for us? We need to be prepared. The Bible tells us that the signs of the end times will be clear to those who are paying attention. Jesus said in Matthew 24:42, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come." This means we must stay alert, not just to what's happening around us, but also to the direction the world is heading. It's not just about feeling scared or powerless. It's about understanding that we're living in special times, times that were predicted millennia ago. The technology that we find so amazing today could actually be a tool used to control and manipulate humanity. And as the Bible teaches us, this control does not come from God. The urgency is real. Time is passing, and the signs are stacking up. Technology is advancing rapidly, and the global landscape is changing faster than ever. We need to stay aware and be prepared, because what the Bible warned us about might be unfolding right in front of our eyes. So, the next time you unlock your phone with your face, pay for something with a card tap, or hear about the latest in artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies, stop and think. Are we really that far from what was predicted in Revelation? Thinking about this, I created an exclusive ebook that will help you discover and understand the secrets behind biblical prophecies. Get yours right now before it's too late. It's available for a limited time right below in the first pinned comment. Signs of the end times. What's happening around us that could be fulfilling prophecy? Now think with me for a moment. Have you ever considered how the Bible's prophecies, written over 2,000 years ago, might be coming true right before our eyes? Every day, we see new technologies emerging, political crises, natural disasters, and a global sense that the world is spiraling out of control. But is all of this just coincidence? Or could we be seeing the signs of the end times that the Bible predicted? In the book of Revelation, there's a clear warning. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. Revelation 13, verse 6-17. For a long time, people read this verse and thought, impossible. How could someone control what we buy or sell? But today, with the rise of digital currencies, facial recognition payment systems, and the rapid rise of artificial intelligence, this idea doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. What if, suddenly, a global system was put in place where all your money and transactions were within a controlled digital network? What would you do if you didn't have access because you refused to accept a certain mark? The beginning of the end? Sounds scary, right? But this is where we need to pay attention. The Bible warns us about these times, calling them the last days. In Matthew 24, 7-8, Jesus talks about wars, famines, earthquakes, and other disasters as being the beginning of birth pains. And if you look around, you'll see that these events are becoming more frequent. We don't have to look far for examples. Climate change is causing unprecedented natural disasters. Political tensions between nations are escalating, and the fear of a world war has never been so present. Are we already living in this beginning of birth pains? Or are these just isolated events? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And what about the divisions and chaos we're seeing in our own societies? Disagreements over how governments should handle global crises, like pandemics and the economy, are splitting entire nations. People are more divided than ever. In Luke 21, verse 25, Jesus said there would be distress among nations in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. Sound familiar? We're seeing increasing political and social instability, while the natural world also seems to be falling apart. So I ask you, are we seeing the first signs of the end times? Are we at the beginning of what the Bible warned would come? And if so, what does that mean for us? The mark of the beast, is it closer than we imagine? The idea of a mark without which no one could buy or sell seemed absurd to many until recently. But think about the technology we have today. With digital currencies, it's already possible to track every transaction we make. With artificial intelligence, we have systems that can identify and control our actions more efficiently than ever. And with advances in chips and other tracking technologies, the idea that a mark could be required to participate in the global economy no longer seems like something from a distant future. In Revelation 13, the prophecy speaks of a mark that everyone, without exception, will be forced to receive. Without this mark, no one will be able to buy or sell. And keep in mind, we're talking about absolute control over the economy. Today, there's already discussion about implementing digital currencies by central banks, which could easily allow governments to monitor every transaction. The technology is ready. The system is being built. The question is, how long before this becomes a reality? But here's the part that should make us even more alert. The Bible says that those who accept this mark will in fact be submitting to the beast, the evil power that will control the world in the end times. And that's the big dilemma. Many may not realize it, but accepting this mark will be much more than just a financial transaction. It will be a spiritual decision, with eternal consequences. Pay attention to the signs. You might be thinking, but we're not seeing all of this happen so clearly yet. And that may be true to some extent. The Bible teaches us that these signs will appear gradually, like the first drops of a storm. However, one thing is certain, these signs are increasing, and that's no coincidence. Jesus warned us in Matthew 24, verse 33. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the doors. And this is where the urgency comes in. This is not the time to stay passive, waiting for things to happen without taking action. We need to be vigilant, paying attention to global and spiritual events, because time is running out. With every technological advance, every global crisis, and every conflict between nations, we are getting closer and closer to the days the Bible predicted. So what should you do? The first step is to be prepared. Not just materially, but spiritually. The Bible teaches us to watch and pray, for the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. This means we must always be ready, living our lives with purpose and discernment. The role of global political leaders. Are we heading towards the Antichrist system? If there's one thing the Bible makes very clear, it's that in the end times, there will be a global system of control. And who will lead this system? The Antichrist. But what does this have to do with the political leaders we see today? perhaps more than we can imagine. The prophecy in Revelation speaks of a leader who will rise on the global stage, taking control of nations and unifying the world under his command. What's frightening is that, looking at today's world, we see that governments are becoming more interconnected. Political decisions in one country immediately affect other nations. We are more connected than ever, and this is creating the perfect scenario for a single leader to assume global power. In Revelation, we read about a figure who emerges with power over all nations. He is described as the Beast, a political leader who will demand worship and submission from all people. He will have absolute control, and the Bible warns us about the kind of government that will be established, a government that will leave no room for dissent. Are we heading in that direction? The rise of a global government. Does it seem unlikely? Let's look around. Every year, the world seems to be moving toward greater centralization. Governments are coming together through international treaties. Global organizations are being formed to deal with economic, climate, health, and even security issues. Nations are creating mechanisms that facilitate control over the masses, often using the justification of safety or protection to advance these surveillance systems. Take the recent pandemic, for example. Suddenly, we saw how easily governments around the world controlled populations, implementing drastic measures under the guise of protecting the public. And this undoubtedly opened many people's eyes to how much people are willing to give up their freedoms when they are afraid. What happens when a global leader backed by several nations sets rules and norms that everyone must follow? Imagine a system where a single government decides how the economy should work, how citizens should behave, and what can or cannot be bought and sold. Does it sound exaggerated? The Bible says it isn't. It warns us about a time when a single ruler will demand total submission, and those who oppose will be excluded from the system, or worse. In Revelation 13, verse 7, it says, "It was given power to wage war against the saints and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation." This shows us how comprehensive and powerful this system will be. And what's even more terrifying, it will be a government supported by a malevolent spiritual power. Now, you might be wondering, how can political leaders so easily fall into the hands of evil? The answer is both frightening and real. The Bible shows us that, since ancient times, many leaders have been influenced by evil spiritual forces. Think about King Herod, who ordered the killing of all children 2 years old or younger to try to eliminate Jesus, Matthew 2:16. Or Pharaoh in Egypt, who commanded the death of Hebrew babies during the time of Moses, Exodus 1:22. These weren't just political leaders making bad decisions. They were being used as instruments by evil forces to push forward a dark spiritual agenda. And what do we see today? It's not hard to imagine that many of today's leaders are being influenced in the same way. Just look at some of the decisions made by governments. Laws that go against basic moral principles, religious persecution in various parts of the world, and a general drift away from God's values. These actions often reflect more of the devil's agenda than God's. In Ephesians 6:12, we are warned, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." This means that many times, what's behind political leaders' decisions is not just a human issue. There are spiritual forces working to shape the world's stage according to the agenda of evil. The preparation for the Antichrist. The Bible tells us that the Antichrist will not come suddenly, but will be preceded by a series of events and changes that will prepare the way for him. This includes the establishment of a global system where control is in the hands of a few. And as we mentioned before, we're already seeing this happen. Governments are becoming more centralized, and power is concentrating in the hands of a select group of leaders and international organizations. Are we seeing the construction of a system that will allow a world leader, the Antichrist, to have the control that the Bible describes? The scriptures tell us yes. In 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4, we read about the coming of this leader. "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This leader will present himself as a solution to the world's problems, but in reality, he will bring spiritual destruction and total control. He will rise in the midst of chaos, promising peace and safety, but his true intent will be to lead the world into false worship and a control system unlike anything ever seen before. What does this mean for us? So what should we do? The Bible warns us to stay vigilant. In Matthew 24, Jesus warns us, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many." Time is moving fast and the global landscape is changing quickly. We need to pay attention to what's happening around us. Global control is approaching, and the leaders at the forefront of nations might be paving the way for the Antichrist system. We cannot ignore these signs. Our responsibility as Christians is to be prepared, spiritually strong, and aware that the battle we face is not just physical, but also spiritual. The system of the Antichrist might already be forming, and it is up to us to remain alert, pray, and seek discernment. Before we move on, I noticed you haven't hit the like button on this video yet, and it's really important so YouTube can keep showing you our content and help you stay informed. So, go ahead and leave a like now. Spiritual influence over leaders. Who is really in control? Have you ever wondered why, throughout history, so many leaders have made cruel and inhumane decisions? The Bible teaches us that there's more going on than we can see. In Ephesians 6:12 it says, "Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." This means that many leaders aren't just making bad choices on their own, but they may be under the influence of evil spiritual forces. The Bible gives us clear examples of this. In the Old Testament, Pharaoh ordered the death of all Hebrew babies during the time of Moses, trying to thwart God's plan. In the New Testament, King Herod did the same, trying to kill Jesus, the Messiah. These actions weren't just political decisions, but part of an evil spiritual agenda. What the Bible shows us is that Satan has always tried to use world leaders to interfere with God's plans. Now, does this still happen today? When we see leaders promoting laws that go against biblical principles, when we witness religious persecution in various parts of the world, we can't ignore the possibility that many of them are being influenced by the same evil spiritual forces that operated in the past. In 2 Corinthians 4:4, Paul warns us that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers, referring to Satan. He is active, manipulating leaders and systems for his own ends. The rise of globalized governments. Today, we see the increasing centralization of power in global institutions. With each new crisis, like the recent pandemic, governments around the world have been quick to adopt drastic measures to protect people, often restricting freedoms. This makes us reflect, how do these situations prepare the ground for a global control system? In the book of Revelation, it is described that, in the end times, a global leader, the Antichrist, will rise and exercise absolute control over all nations. In Revelation 13:7 it is written, "It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation." This leader will have worldwide influence, and many will follow his commands without question. This might begin subtly, with current leaders, consciously or unconsciously, paving the way for this control. Storytelling, a real example in today's world. Imagine a country in crisis. A charismatic leader emerges, promising quick solutions and efficiency. He gains the support of the population and begins to implement strict measures, centralizing power. At first, everyone believes these actions are necessary. However, over time, this leader reveals his true intentions, and his decisions become oppressive, persecuting those who disagree with him. Does this sound familiar? This kind of scenario has repeated throughout history, and the Bible warns us that the Antichrist will come in the same way, promising peace and safety, but hiding evil intentions. In 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 9-10, we read, "The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie." He will deceive many, and his rule will bring spiritual destruction. What does this mean for us? The spiritual influence on leaders is not a thing of the past. The Bible shows us that Satan is still active, manipulating the decisions of many to push his agenda. And what about us? We need to stay alert and be prepared. In Matthew 7:15, Jesus warns us, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves." We need to pay attention to the actions of leaders and their true motivations. Now is not the time to be passive. We must seek spiritual discernment and strengthen our faith. The Bible clearly says that those who remain faithful to God and are not deceived will be saved. So stay alert, pray, and be watchful, because the spiritual influences shaping the world are not just political, but also evil. Time is passing, and the world stage is being set for the fulfillment of the final prophecies. And when those days come, you want to be ready, right? You want to hear God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? Then don't waste time. I have an exclusive ebook to help you prepare, but it won't be available forever. Grab it now before it's too late. Don't let this opportunity pass. It's right below in the pinned comment. Spiritual influence over leaders, the invisible control. When we look at today's world, it's easy to forget that what happens behind the scenes goes beyond politics or economics. The Bible warns us that, since ancient times, leaders have been influenced by evil spiritual forces, as we saw with Pharaoh and Herod, who committed brutal acts to try to disrupt God's plans. These evil forces haven't disappeared. Today, many global leaders seem to be influenced in similar ways. As it says in Ephesians 6:12, "Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world." Decisions that challenge God's values may actually be aligned with the enemy's agenda. Control over the population through laws and policies that seem benign but lead people away from the truth is a reflection of this. The global scene aligns with the Antichrist's plan. The book of Revelation tells us that the Antichrist will have total control over the nations. A charismatic leader will rise, promising peace and prosperity, but will deceive many. Revelation 13 verse 7 says that this leader will be given power over every tribe, people, language, and nation. As we look at the global stage, where the centralization of power is becoming more common, we can see the path being paved for this world government. Current leaders may be, consciously or unconsciously, preparing the ground for this future global government. Many are already implementing control, restriction, and surveillance measures that align with the system described in Revelation. How should we react? So, what does this mean for us? The Bible warns us in Matthew 24 not to be deceived. We need to be vigilant, seeking spiritual discernment to understand the forces shaping the world. Our task is to stand firm in the faith, not being easily swayed by systems and leaders who, behind their actions, may be following a spiritual agenda that opposes God. We must remain watchful, praying and discerning what's happening around us. The real battle is spiritual, and the time to be prepared is now. Stay alert to the signs. Now that we've talked about all this, a very important question remains. Could the signs of the end times be happening right before our eyes? The disasters, political crises, the advancement of technology like AI and digital currencies, could all of this be the fulfillment of the prophecies the Bible has warned us about for over 2,000 years? Jesus warned us to stay alert, because these signs would be visible to those ready to see them. And what about the mark of the beast? Could we be closer to it than we think? With chips, digital currencies, and increasing control over our lives, the prophecies that once seemed distant are getting closer to reality. The Bible is clear that without this mark, no one will be able to buy or sell. And today, we see the technology already in place for that. So we must stay vigilant and be ready for what's coming. I hope everything we've discussed here has opened your eyes to the seriousness of what we're living through. If you feel like you need to understand more, seek answers, know that I'm here to help. Subscribe to the channel, follow the upcoming videos, and together, we'll keep uncovering the signs God has left for us. Until the next video, and may God continue to guide and protect us.